Testing 1 2, testing 1 2. 1 2, testing 1 2. All right, what's up, everybody? Supreme Decisions here, and today I want to go over the psychological side or the idealistic side of law in the context of representation, guidance, and even a mere idea of consulting. Now, I often speak about the two people I hate to actually even consider working with. And it's because of the ideals of one's perception. One is innocent people because they believe the law works as it's written. And there's a means for it to work that way. It just has to be forced because this is an adversarial system and most people don't understand that portion of it. And the intelligent, because again, have a similar ideology. However, they don't understand the pure context of how these things that are should have been known, because intelligent people use that a lot. Well, it should go this way. It should get that, and that's not how it is. And that's why you often hear people tell you the truth doesn't belong in law because it has nothing to do with it. Law only cares about itself. So I want to say this is something I actually wrote 2 years ago and just never did it on video. And basically, let's get into it anyway. Don't forget to think. Hello, that girl. Hello, hello, hello. Don't forget Super Chat's open. And if you have any questions or need consultation, the link is in the description. Now, the ideals of perception. This typically refers to psychology or the conceptual frameworks from understanding how humans interpret and make sense of the world through their senses, their cognition, and their experiences. While there isn't a single definition for the phrase ideals of perception, the ideals often include concepts rooted in psychology, philosophy, and cognitive science. So here we go. Now, the objective perception. The ideal of perceiving the world as it truly is, without bias, distortion, or interpretation. This ties into the quest for objectivity in science and knowledge, where perception is free from personal or cultural filters. Now, while that is a rarity, those people do exist. And they're looking at the world as if there is no bias because they believe everything in the world is set just as it is. When in fact, human nature creates bias. Something as simple as cross-racial identification. That has been shown through science that, I hate to say it this way, but here we go. A Caucasian looking at me and giving a description of me will give a description of a male with dark skin and a beard that they interpret as me, instead of actually giving a true interpretation of me. And want to hear something crazy? I'll do the exact same because ideally, in our minds, we see all white people as similar. They see all dark-skinned people as similar. They see all brown people as similar because through those similarities, which is how we actually see them and through the world of what we have through our experiences. And again, which is why you can also tell one person a story. They tell it to someone else, and by the time you get to person number 10, it's a completely different story. This is the same thing about the objective perception. They're forgetting about the human nature aspect of it. Now, when we're talking about distortion or misinterpretations, these are things that are geared to this new world we have. Our misinterpretations comes directly from what we are viewing and allowing into our minds. Because most people think Facebook, even after Mark Zuckerberg said, he literally said, 96% of everything that's on Facebook is a lie. He said it out of his mouth. People still get their news and information from Facebook. Most people believe everybody's lifestyle is lavish on Facebook because in order for them to aspire or actually to blend in or become part of it, they too have to create an idea of who they are as a whole. And then they don't want to let that go because then that becomes their reality because it's through their idea of perception and their misinterpretation of what reality is. Even the VR glasses. But again, subjective experience. Now, recognizing that perception is deeply influenced by individual experiences, emotions, and mental states. The idea here is the appreciation of personal and diverse viewpoints. This generally does not happen even when you are part of the jury. So, understanding that, you are then accepting that there are viewpoints that you are not going to reach. Give you an example. Many of us talk about picking a jury. We pick a jury of our peers. And I hate that because the context of that is that we're picking a fair jury because we're picking people that see the world as we do. When in fact, most jurors don't look like me. And even the funnier fact was during my RICO trial, 11 of the 12 plus the alternate looked like me, which was the most amazing thing because it was literally 16 people that looked like me to begin with out of 60. I think it was more like 56. But anyway, close to 60. I'm rounding up. But it was in that range, 55 to 60 people. And literally we picked or end up having left 11 out of the 16, which was absolutely amazing. Don't know how it happened, but we appreciate it. And within that, we were able to shape a defense that offered a viewpoint based on not only the emotion that's there was a connection emotionally. There were connections through experiences, not necessarily the mental state, because again, trying to get the mental aspect of it is generally favoring towards the prosecution because most prosecutors lose because they cannot connect emotionally or mentally because they believe they are better because they've gone to school and they think they're smarter because they've gone to school, when in fact, that's what makes them less able to connect to a jury, which is why they don't want to go to trial. Always understand that. That is a feather for you. Now, the phenomenological approach associated with philosophers like Edmund Husserl. This ideal emphasizes understanding perception as it appears to consciousness, focusing on the subjective experience of perceiving. Now, when we're talking about this is more along the lines of idealism. Now, I'm going to give you an actual thing because, again, I've said this more than anything else. Juror number 19, and I wish I still had my book. I actually circled it because I wrote it down even though I had my iPad with me. I wrote it down and I circled it. And my brother's attorney asked, why juror number 19? I said, because he does not think like everyone else. He's actually an art major. And because his phenomenal, I can't even understand how to say this properly, but because he thinks more like a philosopher, he's more open-minded and he's more conscious to the things that are going on around him because he is used to looking at something in a more abstract view. So we use that to our advantage. And plus, he was a big dude, 6'5" at least, and he wasn't hard to look at. He was a handsome man, which was, and it gave that authority figure while looking at him. So we knew the women were going to follow him, but because of his size and his demeanor, we also knew that the other men that were on this panel were also going to follow him. So we used his ability and his thought process to actually guide our defense. Now, empathy and perspective taking. Now, for me, this is a difficult thing because I don't have an idea of the actuality of this, and I'm going to give it to you now. The moral and social idea of perceiving and understanding the world from others' point of view. This aligns with values of compassion, understanding, and coexistence. Now, my issues are ideas of morality, which is why I did the video, the morality, the video. It was not a video, it was a podcast that's on all your leading podcasting platforms. But I spoke about the morality of murder because most people think morality is something that is gauged by, your upbringing, which is possible. But, if you believe in this religion, well, it's possible, but you have to understand the caveats in it. Because I actually used, for my son, because he asked me about it, he listened to it, which was amazing to me. But when he asked the question, I tried to put it in kind of a realm that he would be able to grasp or understand. So I used the context of Thor's hammer. And I said, you remember when they were in the Age of Ultron, they were trying to pick it up. Everybody was going through it, and nobody could pick it up. Cap was able to move it, right? He goes, yeah. I said, do you think Tony was immoral? He goes, no. He said he did some crazy stuff at times, but he wasn't immoral. I said, but even Captain America, was he immoral? No, but he wasn't able to pick up the hammer. So yeah, I said, so now, do you think that Thor's sister was immoral? He fast forward because I believe that was Ragnarok. And he goes, yeah, because she was evil. I said, why was she able to grab the hammer? Because most people pay that no attention. And he goes, oh, I didn't think about that. I said, well, okay, cool. Let's go on. But because I'm going to throw something else. I said, do you think Thanos was immoral? He goes, yeah, because Thanos killed all those people. I said, then why was Thanos not only able to grab the hammer, but to also use it? And he took a deep breath. And he goes, I never looked at that. So when we watched it, he saw during their fight at the end of Endgame, he saw Thanos reach out, grab Thor's hammer, and turn it around and attempt to use it on Thor. Why? Because Thanos was moral in the sense of his ideas of what he was doing. The idea of Thanos was he did not want anyone to know suffering. But then does that not make Captain America immoral? Because he does want people to know suffering because that's what he's fighting against. And always understand that the morality only comes from concepts of, I actually call it the king's decision. Because while a king's decision might seem selfish on the surface, because you don't know all the moving parts of it, they are also selfless because his decisions are done in order to benefit the kingdom. That's why you don't have to like a king's decisions, but you do have to understand that there is a long-term effect from it that you will benefit from. So that's why when we're talking about the social ideas are now given to us through TikTok. Social ideas are given to us through dance moves and jazz hands. And we're supposed to be accepting of someone else's idea of morality, when in fact, morality is designed for the benefit of others and what it is that's going to come from that. And so, does it align with compassion? Most of the time, I don't have compassion for a lot of people. I don't have understanding for a lot of people. And the coexistence, you have to then, for me, you have to understand when we're attempting to coexist, that does not mean accepting of someone else's lifestyle. We can coexist and never come around one another. Because I can live my life and not know anything about you. And you can live your life and not know anything about me. And that's okay. Because that's what we're talking about, the empathy and perspective of this. Now, where it applies in law is when someone says, oh, I'm not going to defend this person because of that, without getting facts, without understanding the context of it. Now, there are certain people that I don't want to deal with, and again, that's okay. I don't have to help everyone. But if I do choose to attempt or even look at helping someone, because everyone is entitled to a defense and a vigorous defense, now, because they also have to accept it. That's the next part of it. They got to accept that. But at the same time, in order for me to get an understanding, I have to know facts on it. And the acceptance of that is, even with me, I tell people, I'm offering you, expectation management. That expectation then goes into something else. So going through the expectation of it, you then have to go and understand the fact of what it is that you are doing. If I offer you a plan and you change the plan, you can no longer get upset with me because I'm executing your plan, your strategy, not mine. But again, that's where my empathy cuts off at. Because the second you choose not to follow guidance, I choose just to do what you're asking me to do. Hence, my empathy is now gone. My understanding is now gone. And if you choose to have me clean up your mess, that's going to cost you more money because you didn't follow the original plan. And that's the thing that most people don't understand, because I can separate myself emotionally. I can take away the compassion from it. I can take away my understanding because I don't have to do either of those. This is why you have people, they tell you, don't operate on someone you love because they can't separate themselves. This is what you would actually look for when you have someone representing you or guiding you. They have the ability to separate themselves from the emotion of it. So now, the balance between sensation and interpretation. Now, perception is not just raw sensory input, but also involves cognitive processing and interpretation. An ideal balance would be to acknowledge sensory input while being aware of cognitive biases or assumptions. These are the things that you're going to take into account when you are talking about your strategy and the implementation of it. Because I tell people, for the cognitive biases, your sensories are going to be shocked because they're going to say all kind of crazy stuff to you. And the second you accept what they're saying, knowing they're going to lie to you, knowing they don't do law properly, knowing they're going to use Gestapo tactics, they're going to use things that have nothing to do with law, and they're working on a psychological game, is second you accept it, these are your sensories that are accepting that. And that's where the balance has to come in at. because you also have to pay attention. Be cognitive. I always tell people, be cognitive of what they're doing, not what they're saying. Because a lot of times what happens when they feel you know what you're talking about and you're doing what you're supposed to do, and there's others around, they're no longer talking to you. They're putting on a show for somebody else. Pay attention to their moves. Because I actually had a young man. He was, I want to say he was down in Houston because I have a lot of clients down in Harris County. And one of the things he yelled out was, the judge yelled this and he yelled that. And he said he wasn't going to do this. I don't have this right. Man, why did he do that? I said, let me ask you a question. I said, what did he do after that? He cleared the courtroom. I said, then what did he do that? He handed me the paperwork I asked for. I said, then what did he do? He told me I could leave and then brought everybody else back in. I said, so what does that say to you? He's like, man, but he said this. I said, no. Did you pay attention to his actions? He gave you what you asked for. He just didn't do it in front of everybody. Because doing it in front of everybody takes away his power. He was no longer talking to you. He was talking to everyone else. But the idea is he got caught up in the sensory portion of it. He stopped being cognitive. Because even the Marines have a point of, they call it, nerve deadening. Well, they'll do things so they can actually just continue to move, complete the mission. Because the one thing you can't do is lose the ability to think. You cannot get angry. You cannot get upset. You cannot get rattled, because the second that happens, you lose focus on the mission and you forget to think. One more example. I was stopped in Atlanta years ago. And I was in a little area called Pittsburgh. Most people, if you're from Atlanta, you understand SWATs. It's off Metropolitan Boulevard. Yes, your boy was out there heavy. So I was out there and I was going to visit someone. Yes, matter of fact, you might even know. I was going to visit Chocolate. You don't know who that is, don't worry about it, because that's who I was going out there to visit. I was going out there to visit Chocolate. Anyway, BSing around. I was stopped. Officer looks at me while we're stopped, and he goes, "It's amazing how calm you are." He said, "I've never seen someone so calm that's getting tickets and I'm towing their vehicle." And I smiled and I said, "Why would I be upset with someone who's handing me $1 million?" Now I have his attention. He goes, "What do you mean?" Again, thinking. I said, "Pay attention to your partner." Your partner, I said something to you when we first stopped. Your partner put his hands behind his back. He's not in a guarded position. He's at parade rest. I said, and I told him, I said, now go look at the tow truck driver's sheet. Your captain came out here. Your sergeant came out here. She left. She didn't sign that sheet. She threw your ass under the bus because you made the stop. Your partner's not going to write a report saying that he had anything to do with your actions. I said, now you're writing a ticket and there is no victim. There was no call and there was no actual cause for you to actually make this stop. Everybody's letting you hang. And I told him, I said, here's the next part. I have the tow truck's driver's tag, or excuse me, the DMV number, or is it the DOT? Yeah, the DOT number. I have his license number. I said, I have your car number. So even if I can't read your number, your name or whatever on there, I can subpoena who's in this car at this time, at this location, because I can get your GPS information. I said, all of this now is on you. You're getting ready to put my kids through college. He stopped writing and he started paying attention to everything I said. Now, they can't pull the truck off the tow truck. Why? I never gave them the keys. And I told him, I said, if you take it off there, it's on you. because you didn't have the keys to pull it up there. It's a 4-wheel drive. You had to drag that damn thing up there. You had to tear up the transmission to get it up there. I said, so yes, all of y'all are getting ready to pay for this. But again, it wasn't until he understood what was happening, because I never stopped thinking. And the whole point was, even when I would get upset, if I was with my brother, he would do this hysterical laugh to piss me off, and it'll bring me right back. That was my hypnosis portion of it, because it would irritate me so much that he's laughing while I'm being serious, and it would just bring me back. Like, okay, I've gone too far. That's why he's laughing. I'm too far out. So the whole point is to stay vigilant of what's going on. Don't pay attention to the show. Pay attention to what they are doing, right? So make sure you're able to always think. Now, holistic perception. This is what one of the things that's intertwined with the first portion. This idea of values the integration of different sensory methodologies and cognitive processes to achieve comprehensive understanding of an experience or phenomenon. So these are the things where I always tell people, okay, you experience something or you're doing something and you're associating it with something else. That's where the holistic portion of it is. Because again, just like we spoke about morality, morality is what? The idea of somebody else's individual influence on your life. Because you're associating something because you believe it covers or is encompassed by this thought or idea pattern. So this is what I also kind of don't deal with a whole lot, but I acknowledge that it's there because it's something that's a barrier. But most times you would encompass this in sales. But again, this is also one of those things when they say, I had to pray about it. And most of the time my response was, didn't you pray for it? So now you're rejecting what God has already sent you. And saying that's one of the things that will get. Now, again, because I'm an asshole, I can't sympathize with it because now you wasted my time. But at the same time, I'm also asking you, since you've already prayed for it, why aren't you accepting what God's bringing you? Because even if they had something to come back with, I'll be like, well, at the end of this, you prayed for it. Now you say you need to pray again. Didn't you? And I'll say most of the time that means you don't have any faith in what God is bringing you, because God also said He's going to use everything for your good. And most people will they'll either throw me out or they'll buy what the hell I'm selling, because now they have to. If they say they believe, they can no longer discredit anything that I've said without saying to themselves they don't believe in what they're praying for. They don't believe in their prayers, and nobody's going to say that. They're either going to get upset or they're going to buy. Either way, they're going to buy and be upset. But then again, they'll understand through context what it is that's going, because those are the things that I used to do in sales because of that. And even in the ideas that it's explaining phenomena. Because again, just like me winning the RICO case, I was sitting first chair. That is a phenomenon, because how many pro se litigants have won a RICO trial with 108 counts and went to jury, got a verdict? You can't think of any. At least not in the last, 100, 150 years? So because it's so rare, it's a phenomenon. But why do we believe it? Because it actually happened. Now, is it something that happens often? No, because the next 3 people that attempt to do it, they end up having to get out on appeal. And that was literally a couple months after mine. But was that just an overcorrection, or was it a lack of understanding, or again, was it a phenomenal event? And I chalk it up to phenomenon, because even with the context of this, I don't do the things the way most people attempt to apply law. I understand procedures better than anybody else. Because even later on today, I'm going to give you something that you probably never heard of. And I've only heard of in 2 occasions. And both of them were in California. So, which is California do their own thing. But anyway, understanding that it's going through and accepting, but understanding anomalies that are not regular. So now, critical awareness. The ideas of being aware of perceptual illusions, biases, and limitations. This ties to philosophy of skepticism, which one questions the reliability of their own perceptions. Now, this is what I spoke about just a little while ago. We are all inherently biased. Our views and lifestyles are shaped differently simply because we are experiencing life differently. So, understanding the illusions of these perceptions, because that's why when you have 3 people that see a car accident, all 3 see that accident differently based on their ideas, their experiences, and their life. So understand those things are there, and these limitations can also be set up as advantages depending on how you strategize to use them, because everything can be used. Now, it may not be used in a great form, but it can also be used and made to advantages, because the one thing that I work on is making your weakness your strongest point. So now let's talk about aesthetic perception. The idea of perceiving beauty, harmony, or meaning in the world. This aligns with artistic traditions or altruistic traditions that seek deeper emotional or spiritual resonance through perception. These ideas highlight how perception is not just a passive reception of information, but an active, complex, and often value-laden process. They vary widely depending on the philosophical, the cultural, or individual perceptions. And when we're talking about that, because even aesthetic or altruistic issues, the way someone sees you determines